Do we live on secure soil here in America? President Bush says yes, and Mr. Bush says the war on terror is our ticket for continued safety on the home front. But now there's a new report from the nation's intelligence agencies that points to new threats that challenge the president's assertion that all is well on American soil. And experts are coming out saying we may be winning the small wars, but we're actually still losing the overall battle. We'll have an expert standing by with more on that in just a moment. But first, correspondent Suzanne Malveaux begins our report tonight with a look at how terror is threatening the security of our American soil.
In light of the new intelligence report that al-Qaeda has gained strength, President Bush acknowledged the terrorist organization has rebuilt.
Al-Qaeda is strong today, but they're not nearly as strong as they were prior to September the 11th, 2001. And the reason why is because we've been working with the world to keep the pressure on, to stay on the offense.
President Bush says the central front in the war on terror is Iraq. But when the U.S. first invaded the country almost 5 years ago, al-Qaeda had very little presence. But the intelligence report says that has changed. Al-Qaeda not only has become a dangerous threat, the intelligence community expects the terrorist group, directed by Osama bin Laden, to use its contacts and capabilities in Iraq to mount an attack on U.S. soil. Mr. Bush acknowledged this new challenge.
And now we find them in Iraq. These killers in Iraq, people who will kill innocent life to stop the advent of democracy. These people have sworn allegiance to the very same man who ordered the attack on September the 11th, 2001, Osama bin Laden.
But the intelligence community predicted that invading Iraq could bring a resurgence of al-Qaeda. The administration says there was lots of advice given before the war, but a lot has changed since.
The fact is, we were harassing them in Afghanistan, we're harassing them in Iraq, we're harassing them in other ways, non-militarily, around the world. And the answer is every time you poke the hornet's nest, they are bound to come back and push back on you.
One of the places the Bush administration has not been harassing them is the remote area between Pakistan and Afghanistan. That is because of a deal made with Pakistan's Pervez Musharraf and tribal leaders. Homeland Security Advisor Fran Townsend says that deal has since dissolved, as the Bush administration more aggressively works with Pakistan's government to go after Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Suzanne Malveaux, the White House.
Joining us to discuss this new terrorism report is Professor David Schanzer, the director of the Triangle Center on Terrorism and Homeland Security. It's a research organization sponsored by Duke University. Professor, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I've read the report, or at least a pretty good summary of it. You call what's going on with the Bush administration and how it's handling the war on terrorism an abject failure. How come?
Well, let me just qualify that. I think that parts of the conflict, the way we're handling the conflict with al-Qaeda, have worked well, actually. Enhanced intelligence, international cooperation on law enforcement has really disrupted the organization. And after all, we haven't had attacks for 6 years, so something has gone right. But I think their larger strategy of trying to undercut the support that these terrorist organizations have in the broader communities has failed very dramatically, and that is why an organization like al-Qaeda has been able to reconstitute and grow strength despite everything that we've thrown at them over the past 6 years.
All right, so are you telling me it's your professional opinion that al-Qaeda is stronger today than it was September 11th, 2001?
Well, I don't have access to the same raw intelligence as the administration has, so I can only read the same reports as you do. But I think if you look at the broader Islamic radicalism and the broader movement across the globe, and you look at all the places that there is activity now, ranging from Somalia, Algeria, obviously the Hamas organization has taken over in Gaza, increased activity in suicide bombing in Pakistan, and we're having sporadic episodes in Europe and in the UK among the radicalized diaspora. I think you have to come to the conclusion that this still remains a very robust movement, and al-Qaeda is the motivating force behind them.
Still a lot of work to do, no matter how you look at it. It seems one of the constant refrains that we hear on talk radio or we see it on talk television is that the United States is losing credibility around the world. People don't like us, but is that really a problem? Because if they don't like us, maybe they fear us, and if they fear us, they won't want to attack us, knowing that we may just come back and attack them.
Well, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think our unpopularity is making it very difficult for us to achieve objectives which ultimately would help us to weaken al-Qaeda. And let me give an example. Less than a decade ago, U.S. support in Turkey, a very important Muslim nation, was well over a majority, in the 60 and 70% range. Very strong traditional support. Now, our polling data suggests that now we rank almost in the single digits. In Turkey, this is a NATO ally, even though it's an Islamist government, but it's a pro-Western leaning government. This is the type of government that we'd like to see elsewhere in the Muslim world. It's very important for Turkey ultimately to become integrated with the West, and the best way to do that's by getting them as part of the European Union. Mm-hmm. We cannot do anything to influence that because we are so unpopular. And there are other examples I could give at other places across the globe.
We need help from places where we're not so popular to help us with places where we're terribly unpopular. Pakistan is not exactly the most popular place in the Muslim world because it's been helpful to the United States, but there have been problems with the Americans dealing with the Pakistanis right now. Where have we gone wrong going down that road trying to team up with President Pervez Musharraf?
Well, I think the problem is that we have made our policy essentially a cult of personality, and that we have supported President Musharraf basically to gain his support and his efforts on our behalf. We've supported him almost in a carte blanche way, even when he's done things like make the agreement with the tribal areas that have been counterproductive to our interests. And now that's come back to haunt us because he's incredibly unpopular, both from the religious fundamentalist side and from the secular parts of the country. His base of support is narrowing and narrowing. So I think we've based it too much more on the cult of one person rather than trying to pursue a set of objectives in Pakistan.
All right. Speaking of one person, Osama bin Laden, do you believe he's alive and well?
I really have no way of knowing. I would think that if he had been killed, the idea of trying to make him into a martyr for propaganda purposes would have been very strong, and it would have been used. So I have to go on the assumption, as does the U.S. government, that he is alive.
All right. Professor David Schanzer, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you for having me.
What do you think about this? Do you agree with Professor Schanzer? Do you disagree? Are we winning the war on terrorism or not? Email us here at The Report by logging on to cn8.tv and clicking on the logo for Art Fennell Reports.